My hat's off to you guys up there. You guys are tough as nails. It was an honor to be there. And Mr. Obama, Mr. Loretta Lynch, Mr. Neil Cornsey, this is America. You don't own and control this. We defy you, saying that you can come in here, make any laws and rules that you want without representation. Well, it's a beautiful day. Got things to do. Catch you later.
I'm not going to name names, but I'm hearing two. There's been two. That's all I can say right now.
And now breaking news. The Oregon standoff that lasted more than 3 weeks has come to a deadly end. A person from Arizona was shot and killed by police. The protesters, the Arizona man who was killed, often represented the militia. Bundy and those arrested face federal charges.
That was planted in my brain still remains within the sound of silence. In restless dreams I walked alone, narrow streets of cobblestone, neath the halo of a street lamp. I turned my collar to the cold and damp. When my eyes were stabbed by the flash of a neon light that split the night and touched the sound of silence. And in the naked light I saw 10,000 people, maybe more. People talking without speaking, people hearing without listening, people writing songs and voices never shared, and no one dared disturb the sound of silence. Fools say now you do not know. Silence like a cancer grows. Hear my words that I might teach you. Take my arms that I might reach you. But my words, like silent raindrops, fell and echoed in the wells of silence. And the people bowed and prayed to the neon god they made. And the sign flashed out its warning, and the words that it was forming. And the sign said the words of the prophets are written on the subway walls, in tenement halls, and whispered in the
So when he
sound
grabbed that building, it's because, if you watch the video, because an FBI agent jumped in front of his truck. He didn't want to hurt him. He wouldn't hurt no one. So he hit that snowbank and he flipped the station. He got out. He looked to make sure he was all right.
Have they contacted you at all, the government? I mean, have they said anything to you guys after what
No.
has evolved?
No.
So you had no contact at all with anybody?
Mm-mm.
Oh my goodness. Who is your mom still around?
The night is far spent. The Constitution has been shredded, but it lives in your heart. You know what freedom is. and what freedom isn't. Stand. Because when you stand, others will stand with you. And God can't stand with you if you don't stand. Once you stand, you can expect the hand of providence to be over you. Don't matter how it ends, it matters how you stand. This is Lavoy Finicum. One cowboy stands for freedom. See you later.
They see it well, but they think this saves us from our
Interesting to see how their stand ends up, shaping things up if it just changed something,
I hate to say it, but his death is the start of something.
His what now?
His death is the start of something. He's not going to die for nothing. There will be people that rise up against the government to help stop this government BS. Put our Constitution back the way it was. Set the government straight. There will be a stand.
Where do you live? Do you live here?
All right, the committee will come to order. Chairman notes the presence of a quorum, and so the Subcommittee on Public Lands and Environmental Regulations is meeting today to hear testimony on threats, intimidation, and bullying by federal land managing agencies. Under the committee rules, the opening statements are limited to the chairman and ranking member of the subcommittee. However, I ask unanimous consent to include any other members' opening statements in the hearing record if they are submitted to the clerk by the close of business today. And hearing no objections, that is so ordered. Let me begin, if I could, by saying how happy I am to have the witnesses here who will be speaking to us. Today we're going to hear from about a number of troubling cases in which federal land managing agencies have employed abusive tactics to extort rural families into giving up property rights, or to bully farmers and ranchers into making concessions to which the federal agency had no legal right. It is not an easy thing for someone to stand up to the government. In fact, in most of the world, that is impossible. But America is different, and it should be different. We should not be afraid to take on the federal government when it trespasses on our rights, and the witnesses before us today are doing just that. I'm grateful for their courage. In many respects, the word heroes or great Americans is too overused, but you indeed are. The Supreme Court has called on Congress to fashion a legal remedy, a cause of action, through which the victims of abuse can have the opportunity to seek redress in the courts. This hearing, I hope, is going to be the first step in getting Congress to protect and strengthen civil rights and property rights, our civil rights, of people whose property the government wants to take without compensation. Legal scholars tell us that property rights are actually a bundle. And that bundle includes water rights and grazing rights and mineral rights and access to recreation rights. And with 1/3 of America being owned by the federal government and it being predominantly in the West, it is no coincidence that most of the problems that we have in dealing with those rights in the federal government are situated in states found in the West, the so-called public land states. I realize that there are going to be a lot of people that are going to try to make this into a conservative versus liberal framework, but that is simply not the case. If you read the two justices who put an opinion on one of these cases before us, you'll find it is the so-called justices from the left who are most emphatic about the rights being abused by the federal government. If I could quote Justice Ginsburg from a case that involved Mr. Robbins, who will testify shortly. The BLM officials mounted a 7-year campaign of relentless harassment and intimidation to force Robbins to give in. They refused to maintain the road providing access to the ranch, trespassed on Robbins' property, brought unfounded criminal charges against him, canceled his special recreational use permits and grazing privileges, interfered with his business operations, and invaded the privacy of his ranch guests on cattle drives. She went on to write, The case presents this question: does the Fifth Amendment provide an effective check on federal officers who abuse their regulatory powers by harassing and punishing property owners who refuse to surrender their property to the United States without fair compensation? The answer should be a resounding yes. Unfortunately, the answer in reality is no, unless we in Congress do something to rectify the situation. I want to also admit that even though this is happening with this particular administration, it is not limited to this administration. These same type of actions done by land managers in the Forest Service, the BLM, Fish and Wildlife, those same actions took place not only today in this administration, but they took place under both the Bush administrations and the Clinton administration and the Reagan administration. Unfortunately, it is a pattern of habit and a pattern of activity that is far too common and must stop in some way. Some will say this is simply a carry-on or a second part to the hearing we had over the barricades being put up during the shutdown. This is more than just barricade part 2. In fact, it is the reverse. Putting up the barricades in the shutdown was an example of the attitude that has always been used, especially in the West, in making public land decisions that have harmed individuals. So that is what we are trying to go for, the longer picture in some way. So with that, Ms. Bud Fallon, welcome back to this committee. It's good to see you again. We're going to start with you, and then we'll work just down the table.
Thank you, Chairman Bishop and members of the committee. Over 200 years ago, America's founding fathers rejected the notion that all power in this nation should come from a king and that the citizens were servants or subjects of the king's rule. Rather, this nation was founded on the principle that each of the 3 branches of government was to be a check on the other. Under this carefully crafted and carefully compromised system, this body of elected legislators is to represent the citizens who send them to these hollow halls. The executive branch is to implement the laws that you pass, and the individual citizen is protected from the abuse of the majority as well as abuse from other individuals by the courts. The Bill of Rights was not written and adopted to give the federal government power. Rather, the Bill of Rights is a document that guarantees that the inalienable rights of the citizens are protected from the abuse of the federal government's power. But this system, where power is to be based in the people, is broken. And so the checks and balances so carefully and skillfully compromised in the Constitution are broken. What we have now is a system that bars citizens from litigating against federal individual employees in court for abuses of power. And what we've really turned into is that all-powerful, unelected, and unaccountable bureaucracy has set up a dictatorship over some of the private citizens who actually employ them. This bureaucratic power is wielded simply by some bureaucrats who use the power of the federal regulations and the, quote, color of their office, unquote, to take private property and
point during this nearly decades-long harassment campaign against you. Did you ever consider just giving in to the BLM just to make it go away?
I wish I could say yes to that, but I just, you know, what's right's right and what's wrong is wrong.
Yeah.
And if I had to give up everything, I was willing.
Ms. Bud Fallon, back to the legal side. While a majority of the Supreme Court declined to recognize that Mr. Robbins had a claim against the BLM for the entire course of conduct, they did nonetheless recognize the need for an effective remedy for people in Mr. Robinson's situation. Is that correct?
Yes. Both the majority opinion written by Justice Roberts as well as a very strong dissent written by Justice Ginsburg both recognize that Congress should give us a path to the federal court.
I want to apologize to you for what you've been through, and thank you for your tenacity in upholding the constitutional rights of Americans. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you.
Thank you. Allow me to ask a couple of questions. Let me follow up on where Ms. Lummis was originally, Ms. Bud Fallon. If Congress fails in some way to take up the court's challenge to how you find a legislative remedy, is there any way that a poor rancher, which is all ranchers, they're land rich and money poor, or modest means rancher, could they ever survive the kind of assaults we've heard about today?
Mr. Chairman, I honestly do not believe that's possible. I represent ranchers all over the West, and when you go against the federal government represented by the Justice Department that has all of the money and resources in the world, it is very difficult, if not impossible, to be able to win these cases.
All right.
And additionally, because we are not is easily Equal Access to Justice Act or Judgment Fund monies, we don't even have the chance to get our money back. None of these people have received payment for their work.
For all of you, keep in touch with Ms. Lummis. We'll be talking about EJA later on as well. Mr. Robbins, let me follow up with the kind of approach that Mr. Amodei was starting with Mr.
There used to be a graying tower alone on the sea. You became the light on the dark side of me. Love remains a drug that's the high and not the pill. But did you know that when it snows, my eyes become alive and the light that you shine can't be seen? I compare you to a kiss from a rose on the grave. Ooh, the more I get of you, the stranger it feels, yeah. And now that your rose is in bloom, a light hits the gloom on the There is so much a man can tell me, so much he can say. You remain my power, my pleasure, my pain, baby. To me you're like a grown addiction that I can't deny. Won't you tell me, is that healthy, baby? But did you know that when it snows, my eyes become a light and the light that you shine can't be seen? Baby, I compare you to a kiss from a rose on the grave. Ooh, the more I get of you, the stranger it feels, yeah. Now that your rose is in bloom, a light hits the gloom on the grave.
Can you tell us a little bit about this event here today?
I'm here for Lavoy Finicum, and I'm nervous. I can't do this. I'm sorry. I'm so nervous.
You're live.
Anyway, I'm here for Lavoy Finicum.
And how long have you been aware of this whole situation going on with Burns, Oregon?
I was watching TV, and a report from the FBI came out about a man.
Okay.
Tell her to continue, please.
Where was from the FBI video. So I'm new to all of this.
There is so much a man can tell me, so much he can say. You remain my power, my pleasure, my pain. To me you're like a grown addiction that I can't deny. Now won't you tell me, is that healthy, baby? But did you know that when it snows, my eyes become a light and the light that you shine can't be seen? Baby, I can feel you to a kiss from a rose.
Hi, we're here at the famous Alamo in San Antonio, Texas, and I'm excited to be here because this was a special place for Lavoy. He named one of our streets Alamo Lane, and then the street in which I live on is called the Line in the Sand. Brandon is here with me, and he can give us some history about the Alamo.
All right, well, this is obviously the battle in 1836 that took place between the Mexican army as well as the Texians at the time of what they were called. And the Alamo, the Texians were outnumbered on all sides, and despite the odds and knowing that they would face certain death, they stayed and fought for liberty, freedom, and our God-given rights. And they did perish in the end and died, but we went on to win the victory in San Jacinto, which happened shortly after.
So Jeanette, so why did Lavoy name the road Alamo and Line in the Sand?
Well, it's symbolic, really, of heroes, of men who stood for liberty and freedom for this country. In fact, one of his relatives was in the Alamo,
Really?
a Bonham. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, his grandma was Beulah Bell Bonham.
Yeah, and what's the significance of Line in the Sand?
Well, you know, we always talked about I have to draw a line in the sand. So that's the significance, that I can't go past this point of no return here. Line in the sand.
The Lieutenant Colonel Travis told his men at one point when they were outnumbered and they knew that they were going to be facing certain death, he drew a line in the sand and said that anybody that wanted to cross that line and stand with him, they could, and the rest were free to go. And pretty much everybody there walked across the line and stood with him. So
that's amazing. We need to do that again today. We need to ask the people in America, where's your line in the sand, and are you willing to come and stand with us for liberty and freedom?
Now Daddy didn't like trouble, but if it came along, everyone that knew him knew which side that he'd be on.
This is it.
He never
It's not a line in
was
the
a
sand.
hero for this county's shining light, but you could always find him standing up for what he thought
Line in the
was
snow.
right. He'd say you've got to stand for something or you'll fall for anything. You've got to be your own man, not a puppet on a string. Never compromise what's right and uphold your family name. You've got to stand for something or you'll fall for anything. Now we might have been better off or on bigger house if Daddy done more giving in or a little more backing down. But we always had plenty just to live in his advice. Whatever you do today, you'll have to sleep with tonight. He'd say you've got to stand for something or you'll fall for anything. You've got to be your own man, not a puppet on a string. Never compromise what's right and uphold your family name. You've got to stand for something or you'll fall for anything. I know things are different. They were in Daddy's day, but I still believe what makes a man really hasn't changed. You've got to stand for something or you'll fall for anything.
These guys are really unconventional legal.
Never compromise what's right and uphold your family name. You've got to stand for something, fall for anything. You've got to stand
Cliven,
for something.
I'm sure proud to have been standing with you all this time.
You did a good job.
Thanks.
I see you in that courtroom, and I appreciate that.
personally have never seen a bald eagle until last year, working on these trials. This is my second somehow. They are so beautiful.